Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll talk with Brent Lang, executive editor of Variety who leads all film coverage. He talks about the executive shakeups on the film side at Sony Pictures, which was prompted by the move of a senior executive to Paramount. And Paramount, as listeners of this podcast know, is on the cusp of many big changes. And then I will offer a short tutorial on Variety's proud history of making up our own words. We call it Slanguage. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Nielsen's second quarter TV viewing numbers are in, and they show that ad-supported platforms still account for nearly 74% of all viewing in the U.S. Streaming platforms account for a little more than 45% of all viewing. Broadcast networks are at about 26%, and cable is nearly 30%. Overall viewing is down 9% from Q1. That's summertime for you. Dar Man, Mark Rober, and a handful of other prominent YouTubers have signed fast channel deals with Samsung TV Plus. This feels like a harbinger of deals to come. Spotify posted strong second quarter subscriber growth with its earnings report this morning. Spotify Premium subscribers jumped 12% year over year to 276 million worldwide, but the streamer still posted a net loss for the frame. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Brent Lang discusses the executive shuffling across two studios, Sony Pictures and Paramount Pictures. And we talk about the overall mood in the film business amid promising summer box office numbers. Brent Lang, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
The industry woke up Monday morning to news of an executive shakeup, not at the very top of Sony Pictures, but a reshuffling in the middle film ranks. And that really felt like a part two to news that broke over the weekend about Josh Greenstein going to Paramount. For both studios, what do you think is going on here and what is the significance of it?
Well, I think mostly this clarifies what everybody had assumed was going to happen, which was that Josh was going to move over to Paramount. This has been in the works for over a year. There's been a lot of rumors that he was leaving. And what it does is it just formalizes that Sanford Panitch is going to remain at the studio as president of the Motion Picture Group. He was co-president with Josh. And then it also elevates Peter Kang, who has been at the studio, I think, for 5 or 6 years, to be in charge of production, which is a very large role that kind of oversees the day-to-day operations of all the different things that are filming. And of course, Tom Rothman, who's a legendary studio head who's become the elder statesman of Hollywood. He's done a very good job of figuring out where Sony and its film division should sit in a very complicated landscape. And what he's realized is that the studio could be very well positioned to be a seller of content to the various streamers, as opposed to spending the capital and the time launching their own in-house streaming service. So he did a really able job of doing that. And then he's done a pretty good job of building up Sony's library of franchises, because that's always been something that they have suffered with in comparison to some of the other major studios.
For sure, Sony under Rothman has left no doubt about where they stand. They are very, very committed to the theatrical experience. So with Josh Greenstein going over to Paramount, he had been co-head of the Motion Picture Group under Tom Rothman, but co-head with Sanford Panitch. Now Sanford is now solo head. He's, of course, a longtime colleague of Rothman. He was at Fox and then came to join him later at Sony. Were there any factors there that surprised you?
He's a very close confidant of Tom Rothman. Sanford was known for the creative connections, for overseeing budgets, things of that nature, whereas Josh, really, he came up through marketing. He's a very well-respected marketer. I assume there will be questions about whether or not at some point they will hire someone to fill that role.
Let's shift the question now to Paramount, which is in the midst of a transition. So, Brent, my question for you about Josh Greenstein's move to Paramount. The Paramount Skydance media merger is expected to close by August 7th. There's a lot in transition there right now. Why would he be hired for this senior role before there's even clarity as to who's going to be doing what at Paramount Pictures and other divisions? What are you hearing about the scope of his job?
Well, I'm not sure that Skydance was happy that Josh's hire got out this early. It was an open secret in Hollywood, which, obviously nothing stays secret very long in Hollywood. My sense is that his role will not be exactly what Brian Robbins was doing, and that his purview may move beyond just movies. I don't know if that means that it will involve streaming as well, because Skydance has also hired Cindy Holland, who, ran TV at Netflix for a while, so they have a very strong person there. I think Dana Goldberg, who is their chief creative officer at Skydance, is going to have a very big role at the merged company. So it's a little unclear. But I assume that part of what they are hoping Josh will do is bring some of that marketing expertise to their overall operations.
What is your sense in the film business? The Paramount Skydance merger, after a lot of obstacles, it does actually look like it's getting to the finish line. Do you think, is there hope in the business that Skydance, that this influx will restore Paramount to something like its former glory as a Hollywood major studio? Do you sense optimism, or is there still sort of a pessimism that, wow, this company really has a long road to go?
And I think that people are glad that there's stability. And then they're also glad that Paramount wasn't just sold to another film studio where it would have just been folded into those operations, and probably that would have meant fewer films. And there will be terrible layoffs because of this merger, but it would have been even more extreme if it had been part of a pre-existing studio. So I think there's a sense of relief there. So I think the idea that somebody with as deep pockets as David Ellison and Larry Ellison are coming in here could help with some of those concerns. I do think that the way that this merger was approved, the settlement that happened with the Trump administration over CBS News, some of the comments to gain the approval of the FCC about DEI, I think there are some concerns. Hollywood is a very liberal town. I think there's some worries that, artists will not be respected. And so I think there's going to be something of a charm offensive that needs to happen. That said, if people are willing to greenlight passion projects, if they're willing to support them, something tells me that even if someone has some political objections to maybe how this happened, they'll be able to suck it up and make movies there.
I suspect you'll see, like, as is often the case after a merger, some flashy moves to show, hey, we mean business. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to bring to the table.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you to step back a few more feet and look kind of in the broader film business. I know from talking to Rebecca every Monday for Box Office Reports that year to date, the box office overall is up about 12 to 13% over last year. It's a good sign, and the pipeline has been flush. How do you think people are feeling in the general sort of the Hollywood and New York film business? How do you think people are feeling after what has been basically a strong summer?
I think people are feeling better about the overall health of the theatrical space. And there is a sense that people still want to see movies in theaters, and they're still looking for events in their cultural life. And that's something that movies uniquely provide. That's good for cinemas, which is good for the overall business. But if you're a studio, there are other concerns that you have. One of them is that the domestic business is doing much better than it has been since COVID. But the overall global marketplace has really shrunk a lot. China is kind of a black hole. It used to be one of the strongest markets for movies, but tensions with the US and a kind of a rise of local language projects and product there has meant that that market is not delivering the kind of grosses that it was, 5-6 years ago. And then Russia, of course, because of what's happened in Ukraine, has kind of been offline. That was a fairly major market. So when you're looking at a movie like Superman has done very well domestically. It wasn't as much of an international play, but it will end up grossing about the same globally as Man of Steel did in, I think, 2013 or 2014. And some of that is just a sign of how much smaller that overall global marketplace has been. And that's a problem because it's not like movies have gotten cheaper to make. Inflation has absolutely taken over the movie business. There were COVID delays, strike delays. And so most of these major blockbusters cost more than $200 million to produce, some of them even north of $300 million. And because movie theaters keep half of ticket sales, if you're going to make money theatrically, which very few movies do, you need to double your spending and then add to that production budget $100 to $150 million in marketing costs. And you're looking at movies that are going to just barely break even, despite the fact that they're making $600, $700 million. And so I think everybody in Hollywood is looking at this, seeing some positive signs, but also realizing that there's a real cost problem that they have to get their hands around.
Brent, thank you very much for helping us kind of sort through the realpolitik of what's going on at a turbulent time for every part of our business, but particularly the business you love so much, the film world.
Thanks for having me.
Next up, I'm happy to introduce what will be a recurring segment called Vintage Variety. We are not shy about celebrating our storied history and our proud legacy in entertainment. So let's step into the Wayback Machine. For 120 years and counting, Variety has been known for zingy, irreverent headlines and our famous Slanguage. Slanguage, which is the word language with an S on the front, is the glossary of old Variety. It's industry jargon that we invented. Soap opera, sitcom, biopic, DJ. You read those words in Variety first. One of my favorite Slanguage words is tubthump. It means exactly what it suggests, that someone is in heavy promotion mode, an actor or a director or a studio. It conjures the image of a person walking around thumping an upside-down wash tub to make noise. Here's a fun usage from the April 17, 1952 edition of Daily Variety in a story datelined from Dallas, where Humphrey Bogart was promoting his new movie, The African Queen. Here's the story. Humphrey Bogart, who was out tub-thumping the African Queen yesterday, finished up in Dallas after visiting San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, and 10 other Texas towns. End quote. This 3-paragraph story includes a good example of vintage Variety irreverence. It ends with a nod to Bogart's reputation as a hard-drinking guy. We wrote, quote, Bogart is particularly pleased that despite the overwhelming Texas hospitality, he's resisted all offers of bourbon and branch water. Instead, he's sticking to health-giving scotch and plain water. End quote. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. More glossary items to come. As we close out today's episode, here are a few things we're watching for. Jerry Bruckheimer, Matt and Ross Duffer, Catherine Pope of Sony Pictures TV, and Brett Paul of Warner Brothers TV are among the speakers lined up for Variety's Entertainment Technology Summit. The day-long event will be held in LA on September 25th. Project Runway is back on Thursday on a new network. The fashion design competition series debuts Thursday on Freeform. Heidi Klum and Christian Siriano are back. Tim Gunn is not. Before we go, congrats to Jennifer Way. She's joined the music label and publishing firm Empire as Executive VP for Nashville. She was previously Senior VP of Sony Music Nashville. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Brent Lang. It was edited by Aaron Greenwald. Sticks, nicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.